Basically, as operations coordinator of WGRE, we have, in the past month or two, really put a push to distinguish our history, that WGRE has been around since 1949. We transcribed some oral tapes by Betty Turnell and Dr. Harold Ross. And I guess basically I'm very honored to have you, Harry, as our Harry Jacobs, one of our 51 alums, as our guest.
And I'm delighted to be here.
And I really just wanted you to give me your insight as to what WGRE was like during your time, as well as maybe talk about Betty Turnell and Dr. Harold Ross, too.
Well, of course, we started, before we had the radio station grant, we started in the basement of Speech Hall. Is that still, Speech Hall is still there, isn't it now?
I think it is, yes.
Okay. Anyway, it was very, very small quarters, and nothing went out on the air. Then in 49, sometime in 49, they got the grant to go be the first 10-watt educational FM station in the country, which was quite an honor, and that was Dr. Ross that spearheaded that through. And we moved into studios up in Harrison Hall, third floor of Harrison Hall. As I remember, the psychology department was somewhat right around there, too. And our entire complex at Harrison Hall was probably smaller than this room that we're in right now. Very tiny operation. And I started probably, I might not have been the first semester we went on the air, because we started then in the fall, I believe it was, of 49. I might have been on in the winter of 49 and had a program called Candlelight and Silver.
Whew.
2 hours of kind of show tune type
Be
stuff.
still, my heart.
Oh, yeah. Anytime I went out on a date, I said, now be sure and listen. I think I had a 2-hour show 2 nights a week. But the next year, I decided I'd like to become a newscaster. And so Betty gave me, I think it was like 6 to 6:15. It might even have been a half-hour show. I think I had that twice a week, too. But we had no AP wires like I've seen 2 or 3 around here. I had to go down to the Banner, as I remember it was at that time across the street from St. Paul's Catholic Church down there. And I'd come back to the fraternity house with this ream of paper and try to be cutting out stories. And of course that was a time of the Korean War. And a lot of those names were just impossible to print. And in and those days they didn't spell it out phonetically for you, so you really had to guess. Well, I don't know how many listeners we had, but I never got any complaints anyway. But that was a tough deal. I mean, the facilities you have today, you couldn't compare with what we started, but that was our starting point. And we used to do a lot of sports broadcasting, both for DePauw and for the Greencastle High School. In fact, that's how they tried to get the townspeople to listen, by promoting the fact that they were going to be broadcasting at least the basketball games.
This athletics, the draw.
That's right. And of course it was FM, so there were not too many FM receivers at that time, so you had to give them something. And we were 10 watts, so you know we didn't cover that big an area either. You're now, what, 250 watts?
1,000. We just increased this summer.
To 1,000?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really something. Well, you know, even though we were 10 watts, you wouldn't have 100 times the coverage we had, the way the engineering works.
Right.
What else can I tell you?
Well, when you were talking about what drew you to news, I think now of how we have newscasters come in, they have everything on the AP wire, to go down and grab your own news copy, take it back, cut, paste, and do. How long did you allow for preparation for your news?
Well, that took me about no less than 3 hours. I mean, it was a big job. And when you just do it twice a week, you really don't get into a routine that you could establish. Yeah, and my roommate, I should say, would come in and he couldn't get in the room. I mean, it was just full of paper like that. But it was a good experience for me, and that's really what got me into broadcasting. I got the award that year for being the outstanding newscaster. I thought, wow, this is it. I'm in showbiz. But I had to go in the Army, which I did.
Now, was that your senior year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And after I got out of the Army, I thought, well, I was the outstanding newscaster is what they called it. And so I went, I'll never forget, I went to a little station in Evanston, Illinois, right near where I lived, and applied for a job. And I guess it was the program manager said, well, I'll tell you what, go in the studio and broadcast the Northwestern Notre Dame football game. I said, do what? He said, well, you know, broadcast the Notre Dame Northwestern football game. Went in the studio, and after about a minute and a half of jabbering, I mean, there's no windows even. I had to try to pretend like I was at the game. I finally said, peace, I give up. I'm not talent. I understand that right now. And so then I decided I'd try to go into sales, which would lead to management, which I did.
Wonderful. And then what else, where had you gone from there?
Well, I was a salesman for some national reps for, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 years. And one of them, I was at NBC Spot Radio Sales, National Spot Radio Sales, for about 5 years. Left them, went to Westinghouse Broadcasting, and then NBC asked me to come back as sales manager, WMAQ did. And at that time, the station was just terrible, and I almost didn't do it, but I finally did. And then within about a year and a half of being sales manager, I was asked if I'd like to run the New York radio station, WNBC. And I did not want to live in New York, and so I turned it down. But I said to the president, I said, why don't you make Lee Hansen, who was my boss as general manager at WMAQ, the manager in New York? I'm sure he'd love to live in New York. And ha, ha, ha. About 3 weeks later, I came into the office. Lee Hansen had gone to New York on just a regular trip. And I came in a little late, got in about 9:30. My secretary said, where have you been, New York? I've been trying to get you for so long. I said, well, what's up? And she said, I don't know, but they want you to call right now. So I called this New York, and I said, well, there ain't, what is it? They had a sales call I was on. Don't you understand that? Which, of course, I wasn't. And they said, well, we want you to come to New York right away. When can you get here? I said, well, I guess I can get an evening flight. Or, no, you didn't understand me. When can you get here? You go home and get something, have the cab wait, and get to the airport and be here by 2 o'clock this afternoon. Oh, my gosh. I think I've been fired. So I got there, and the president said, well, we have decided to fire Lee Hansen. I said, oh my gosh, why are you, really? Yep, we've hired him here in New York, and we'd like you to be the new manager of WMAQ. So that was my big stint, and I enjoyed that very much. That was kind of fun, being general manager of a big radio station like that. But anyway, back to WGRE. Which is far more important at DePauw than what I was doing. I just hope that your students can appreciate some of what they have here facility-wise after you showed me around here today. This facility you have really is better than probably 60 to 80% of the radio stations in the country.
I think so,
and
too.
when these kids go out and start seeing some of these radio stations and what they really have to do to get the same type of equipment, it will be unbelievable to them, I think. So I hope that they enjoy what they have here, because it is a fantastic facility. And you've got 220 people, you say, on staff?
Yes, 220 students involved in all aspects of WGRE. One of the things about WGRE that I think probably started around your time, I'm not definite in the history, but we are a student-run organization. We have a board of directors. We have 14 student directors, and they serve in areas from station manager, program director, to promotions, news, sports, on down the line. And I think it's wonderful that they get the training here. They are able to manage their peers, which doesn't happen in very many instances on campus, and it's hard to get that kind of experience even on an internship.
I should say.
I mean, that's one of the things I think we have done over the years, is really allow them to make the decisions and sometimes to let them fail. I mean, I think it's much better if they fail here than if they're out on their first job.
That's right.
And sometimes that's very hard to do when I know that might happen, but I think it's a wonderful experience.
Well, we're all going to fail sometime or another on the job, too, and fewer than than most, we hope, but you know, you're going to have failures. We've all had those failures, in programming especially, that we think we've really got something hot and falls flat on its face. But we'd had student, they call them VPs back then.
Yes, I read that.
And I think we had like 7 or 8 or 9 in through that number. I was not that involved in the station. I had too many other outside extracurricular activities that I just couldn't give up that much of my time, because those people had to work almost exclusively for the radio station. So that's why I kind of went the production route, and I'm glad I did. And then I used some of that production. I then did some stock market reports later on in some big 50,000 watt stations after I left broadcasting per se, and owned a few of my own radio stations. And I would say I owned, I guess, 4, and I don't think one of the 4 could come close. I mean, wouldn't even come close to the facilities that you have here. Not just in the space, but the equipment that you have. And one of my stations was up in the Fox Valley, up in Appleton, Neenah, Menasha, Kenosha, which is a pretty good area. And we were #1 station, a good share of the 10 years that I owned the station. So, you know, we had to make do, though. You just don't realize the facilities that you have here, how great they are.
It's so nice to hear that. I think that it's a credit to the university to provide these facilities, and I think we're not doing anything different than we did when we were at the old station, but we can do it much bigger and much better. And the opportunities, it lends itself to creativity. If someone's interested in doing a particular talk show, we have an on-air studio to do that. You know, we're not crammed in a production studio the way we used to be. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things. One of the things, too, I wanted to ask you, having met Betty Turnell and been amazed at her, she was one of our founders, she and Dr. Harold Ross. Would you tell me about her?
Well, she was a grand person, and she took a liking to me for some reason. I took some classes from her, and from Dr. Ross, too. You see, I still call him Dr. Ross. But Betty almost insisted over the years, anyway, after I graduated, that I call her Betty. But she was always very interested in what I was doing, and we kept in touch. In fact, she took a sabbatical to Hawaii, where they also had a 10-watt FM station, educational, and we visited her in Hawaii for a couple of days. I mean, a couple of days out of the 10 days that we were there. But she was always very interested in what her alums, her students, were doing. And we had some people that did pretty well in broadcasting through the years, and Betty kind of thought of those people as her family. But nothing was too much trouble for her, and she always enjoyed keeping in touch with everybody and letting everyone else know what the others had done with their careers, too. And just a marvelous, marvelous person that had a lot of love and affection and respect for her former students. She came to WMAQ a couple times, which I was delighted, because then I was the big cheese at the radio station there. And she just thought that was so grand that one of her students had become a manager of a 50,000 watt station. But she was someone, if you ever had a problem, I think you could probably talk to her, and you knew it was going to go no further, and she would help whatever way she could. And had it not been for Betty, it probably would not have come to pass that this radio station was as successful as it is, even today. And of course, Dr. Ross, goes without saying, had he not been the one that got the paperwork going to get the grant, it never would have happened. They were a great team, and they had a lot of, I think, love and respect for each other, and they sure helped each other all the time. I had a couple of classes from Dr. Ross, too. Persuasion was one I can remember. So
and I bet he could do that.
He was great, and but that, you know, it was kind of a family type thing, and that's maybe why I went into the radio station. I don't really know why I went into the radio station.
They were actually, I think, mavericks. When I read this history and having met them, Betty Turnell was here for our 40th birthday, And she walked all over campus. She wouldn't let me take her anywhere. I mean, she set her own pace. She went off and, did her own thing, but yet she was so well loved by her alums.
And she had a bad accident,
Yes, she had. Yes.
So for her to be walking like that, she wasn't a feisty, but she had a lot of energy, and she would never say die. Although I heard from you that she had passed away, and
yes, she had.
I thought I had talked to her within that period of time, but undoubtedly I hadn't. But I'd call her every 6 months to a year, but evidently I didn't call her that past year because she died in, what was it, 92?
93.
93?
Yes.
I bet you I talked to her just before she died.
Well, she was just a fascinating woman. Well, basically, those are the things that I wanted you to share with us, is your perspective on then and a little bit on now. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and if any of the students ever complain about the AP wires or one thing or another, of how difficult it is to do a 3 or 4 minute newscast, as I understand, ours was 15 to 30 minutes, and I don't remember which one it was. Explain to them
I'll have them
if
call
they
you.
go down to the banner or whatever it's called now and get all that AP paper, and then they'll find out about it. And you're now on compact disc too, which is great. So
Yes. Yeah.
we used wire back then, wire recordings. So.
Well, I was even amazed when she was talking about the paper recordings. And
Yeah.
that was one of the first
That
ones
was
paper.
before wire.
And she said how frustrating that was, and
Yeah.
the different things. I think it's just amazing. And the technology, I know, even since I came here 7 years ago, all the music came in on albums still, vinyl. And now, rarely do we ever get vinyl. We always get CDs. So, I mean, I think that's something that,
Yeah.
and I hope this facility will continue.
I hope you keep it going too, and the very best of luck to you, because I think it's a great thing for the students to be able to work at a working radio station, and they'll find out all the experience that they're really getting that they're not fully realizing at this point, I'm sure.
That's kind of
But-
like having children.
That's right. But I thank you for having me down here. It's great to be back again.
Thank you, Harry.